All right, good morning. So I'm going to get started, and I understand that this time round there are a number of faculty across the CUNY system, and in general, really, even within Hunter, for some time now, people are starting to pay attention, which is great. Professors in foreign languages, So today's presentation, I'd like to kind of skew this more toward, how do we talk about translation and why it's important, and from an industry perspective rather than from the student experience, although we'll touch on that as well, by way of a brief introduction to the program. So I'm going to start out here. So the program, the Hunter Masters in Translation Interpreting, was launched in fall of 2020. As you can see, that was a significant kind of the year of of the pandemic and the lockdown and everything. So yeah, and we have come some ways now. The program is currently, I'm the director, and the program is currently supported by Daniela Mojica. So we're very happy about that as our program admin. So basically, when we think about translation interpreting nowadays, this is the kind of imagery, right, that you find that is common now, that we are imagining translation interpreting as inextricable, really, as language services that are inseparable from AI, from technologies. So the idea of, you see, here is a human figure that actually looks quite artificial, right? A human in that sense. It looks more animated than human, and that's the idea. And how do you break down language barriers, for business success in terms of leveraging on so-called artificial intelligence capabilities, right? So with multilingual chat bots being like the thing that is really out there. And indeed, translation interpreting programs that are positioned as professional graduate programs, as opposed to the research track. So that's how we are. This is kind of the larger context of our conversation today, in terms of trying to understand what this is as a field. In some ways, you can't really understand this as a field without thinking about technologies, without thinking about how we have advanced in communicative, right? All kinds of options, of modes of communication. So a quick glance at this. See, this is actually a fairly recent as a forecast for the next 10 years of the global language service market. To start, note that it is now common to talk about the global language service market in a way that probably is still not. There's very little currency in academia, but it is out there. We talk about language services in the plural very often, or the language services sector in the U.S. context, but we also talk about language service as the marketplace as well. So if you see here, right, the U.S. actually dominates this market with $60.63 billion, right, as the addressable market value in 2022. And if you look across the board, right, these are the market shares, okay, of the global language market. Okay, there we go. Okay, so jumping to this image, yeah, this was the image I was talking about, right? The global language service market and the language service sector, is, like I said, right, it's all about technologies, and you can't really, you really need to talk about translation and interpreting, including nowadays localization as the third key word when you're talking about the field, and the field is inseparable from the translation technologies that are so quickly kind of flooding our imagination in this area. So and of course, yes. So professional translation and interpreting as an area of study, right, as a field, is really very much distinguished from translation studies in the traditional, space of liberal arts, right, where you're just interested in the language and you wow over the beauty of it. Unfortunately, in some ways, this is a little less romantic, but this is where the jobs, the field is driven very much by job demands, right? Market demands out there. So it's about business for the most part, although of course it's also about supporting governmental civic discourse in North America, where English is still very much the normative. So there's a lot of those kinds of that space as well. But in any case, right, today's focus is on how do we talk about this, right, in a way that excites students, that makes sense to them in the current in the current era. Okay, so these are some of the statistics that you see, right? Typically, this is a forecast of the global language service market, and you see the U.S. dominating this market. Actually, over half of of the market actually is dominated by the US currently. And you would think, okay, why is that so, right? Given that, the other languages, most other languages in the world come from other parts of the world. Well, the fact is that it is the companies that control and that continue to research and innovate technologies, turning the economy into what we call the platform economy of today. So serving the platform economy, you see here, right, the largest element in the global language service is localization, right? And localization really is the catch phrase, the term of art for linguistic transposition that involves actually coding and decoding and encoding in the digital web platforms. Okay, so that's really what it is. It's nothing. It's not the old localization word, that is kind of been hijacked. It's not about anthropologists, going into the field and and localizing themselves. It's quite the opposite. Okay, so it's really about translation into other languages, only in those areas that that make it more convenient for people to be comfortable navigating the various platforms that allow people to to spend money basically comfortably, right? To buy things online. Translation, subtitling, dubbing, all of these are part of that digitalized content world, as you know. Transcription, interpretation, you see, this actually constitute a smaller market because these things with oral rendition of content very much serve the monolingual, large monolingual spaces that need to be accommodated to, such as North America, Canada, the US, certain parts of Europe where you have hegemonic, say German or Spanish or Korean or Japanese, those places. But even then, right, there's so much purchase into English that other than English-speaking countries in the world, like predominantly English-speaking countries, you really have to think of interpreting, if you're into interpreting, in terms of working for the UN, which, by the way, it does not, hire too many full-time interpreters. So in either that or working in the North American context for interpreting. So continual advancements in language technology that drive this field. Okay, so if you have AI and natural language processing, NLP, and machine learning, these things, like I said, have revolutionized content communication and content delivery, and which is what is making it so essential for us to think, in terms of multilingual language services. Because nowadays the bottom line with good business services have become actually serving multilingually. It's kind of it's become more and more of an expectation than before. You have neural machine translation, again, an AI-driven approach that drives demand for translation, multilingual support, and content localization. So these things are not actually at odds with translation interpreting. You think on an individual level, oh my God, they're going to replace human beings. But in fact, it's not. It's because what it's doing, what is happening is that globally, it's more and more normalized that that spaces ought to be accessible multilingually, and therefore there's so much content and so much of these sorts of technologies that we need human beings behind them, okay, to be running these channels of communication. So natural language processing capabilities allow language service providers, right? So specifically, right, the agencies to analyze huge amounts of data, of text data, extract insights, and size up the scale and volume of customer, of language solutions, customized language solutions to specific industries and domains. And those things require, again, right, informed linguists to actually make this happen. All right. So you can see how you need to kind of be reimagining what it looks like to be working in the industry. It's not the same as the traditional translator, working at home, with a piece of text and looking up, dictionaries, piles of dictionaries on the desk. Not like that at all, right? In many, practically in all cases, you are in some kind of collaborative platform, right? And working with others in the team. So cloud-based platforms, collaborative tools, right? Those are the things that facilitate seamless interaction between linguists, clients, and project managers across the globe. And this is what's happening, right? So it's not something that you can kind of pretend, it doesn't happen. We're still in the classroom, professor is still distributing sheets of paper for you to translate, and you don't have to ask, where these things are coming from, right? The whole idea is that, it's not going to happen if that's how, if you sit at home, it doesn't matter, what degrees you have, right? The jobs are not deliverable that way. So AI and language technology continue to advance, right? This is what's happening. So the service market, right, is somehow, it has to be impelled, like it or not, toward continued growth and innovation, and with new applications, and so you have different services constantly emerging. Things that we're not thinking possible. For example, like multilingual chatbot. Chatbot is something that we just only recently, that now we're starting to take for granted. Every time you try to book a hotel, you try to get an air ticket, you try to do anything, you have chatbot coming up saying, "Hey, can I help you?" And you're not sure, right? In fact, this week twice I had to ask online, as I was doing something, excuse me, are you human or are you AI? Right. And that's something you got to live with, right? Because if you want to know, and they're good, they tell you, they say, "Oh, I'm human." So growth in the US context, right? What does it look like? So annualized 6.5 growth, that's the growth rate. Actually, and it's amazing that we have held through the pandemic at a 4%, through this last couple of years, right? While many white collar fields are on decline. Okay, so we're on the decline. Of course, now we're starting to bounce back across the board, but still, right? The language services industry is very strong in that way, and partly because it is a field that is not and no longer. And in the first place, it starts out as really being very minor in the brick and mortar world, right? It is clearly not a retail field. It's clearly a business to business field from the get go. Okay, and so with all these technologies, it's just kind of driven us to this explosive rate of growth and development. So the US has the lion's share of the global market at 67.2 billion, and over half of let's say take 100, the top 100 language service providers, there's LSPs here, okay, are based in the US. Okay, so that's why, right, when you think about it, COVID impels reimagining of the global supply chains. And businesses in different sectors, in food, in everyday, household appliances, all sorts of things, right, have to kind of shift because, the pandemic was hitting different spots, and some of it unpredictable. And with all of these shifts, right, in fact, it's forcing businesses that are, based in the US also, to think about, new communicative channels, needing translation and interpreting. So, in the meantime, of course, it starts with a historically monolingual American academe, right, lags behind this. And this is what's happening. So we're talking about now about us, So in fact, it's because we lag behind, there's a lot of opportunity there. Okay, professional translation programs, right, are still to this day still few and far between. It's commonplace. Every university is, go study English, right? And English in America means English literature, of course, right? So when you compare that, right, go study, go for an MBA. Study business. But then professional translation programs, you really have to look, right? They're very much, you have now, I believe thanks to the students' research, last count was there are 13 universities with translation interpreting, and that, but they are not language specific. Most of them are starting, at the level of, okay, maybe a certificate, in translation interpreting, maybe there is a program in Spanish, and that's it. Okay. So, Hunter College, has, our program really has an edge in that sense, right? So what is this Hunter Marti in this context, right? We're in New York City, right? The hub of the language service industry. If any place physically, right, that has a lot of happening in translation and interpreting, and that's New York City, right? And particularly in the interpreting area, right? In that arena, really, most interpreters and translators at some point, right, in the US have had a stint. If they don't live in New York, they've had a stint in New York City. And that's how it is. You start out this way as emergent translators and interpreters. And we're part of the School of Arts and Sciences at Hunter. We're deeply rooted in the humanities. Hunter College is the humanities arm, of the four, colleges, upper colleges under CUNY. And we have indeed a strong foundation of, a spectrum of foreign language programs, and it's very strong in culture and area studies, right? And these are traditionally the feeding, sources, for a graduate program such as Marti. We're grounded in local multilingual communities. A number of our students, I would say for Spanish, the majority of our students come as heritage speakers, come straight from the communities in Queens, in Upper Manhattan, right, and around the area in the East Coast. And possibly I would imagine, I haven't checked recently, we're still the only affordable program of its kind in the area, right, across the East Coast. And certainly we look at language specific, right? We are the only multilingual language specific high flex program in the region. Okay, because other spaces, programs are cropping up, but they're not like this. They're not how we run this, right? As I'll show you very quickly. So Marti's positioning, right, is about creating and maintaining, right, and offering a professional graduate studies program that is skewed from the get-go and we continue to do that for the job market. Okay, and how do we imagine this, right? If you look at how a graduate studies program, okay, is really about a 360 space, because at this point you're done with your undergraduate, you're done with your the core curriculum and all that, and you want to be right there in the world thinking about, okay, how can I learn the skill sets that I need to learn, and make sure that I have that that worldview that is attuned to the lingual interlingual services. So if you look at how students come from foreign language cultural studies track, okay, so you have the one space, right, and how we move people from that space into understanding the marketplace, right? You want to also move people from the undergraduate studies in business and media studies. These are the kind of the popular majors, urban planning, urban development, those sorts of things. People that are more kind of into sort of culture and society, right? Into looking at how can we contextually make a difference in the world, right? And that's what we teach undergraduates. Liberal arts, right? Liberal arts, traditionally, liberal arts is very much about, of course, the great, Western democratic, ideals, and how do we move that now and make this still applicable in a globalized era, right? How do we think and include, others? So obviously, the interlingual worldview, and the skill sets that you learn, when you translate, you interpret, when you think about all the spaces for localization, we are constantly thinking in terms of diverse and inclusive society, right? We're out of the mold of the monolithic, the Anglo-monolithic, we're looking at, okay, people, it is a healthy thing to be unsettled by differences. It's a healthy thing to encounter things, in other languages and other cultural systems. Then, multilingual, global multilingual perspectives, they're out there, international conferences, be aware of, how things are happening globally, right? Even right here in our neighborhoods, you have, say, an international film festival. Why do you have that? You have that to bring together, right? Once again, different sorts of perspectives from around the world. And then, of course, right, not least, the platform economy and how that is evolving in the globalized fashion, and how entrepreneurism, when you think about from the neighborhood mom and pop, you do what you do because like your parents happen to do this, therefore you do it. And now, right, people, you have even right here in New York, Chinatown, this is what I noticed, right, through the pandemic. What we're having is we have a younger generation, people that have gone to Ivy League schools, whatever it is, they're coming and they're reimagining that the old Chinatown businesses, right here in New York City, and doing things differently, and so they're combining the platform channels, of promotion and marketing, and making it make sense, in the local area where Chinatown, of course, is still very much a community as well as a tourist destination. So that's how we, that's where we're at, okay, when we're thinking about graduate studies under Marti. So our value proposition, right, that we're constantly thinking about the pragmatic market perspectives. Our instructors are practicing translators and interpreters that are in touch with the industry, active in the industry for the most part. They're grounded in hard skill preparation, okay, and then that's what we ground you in, right, that you are actually in the classroom, you're coding, you're revising, your database management, with your terminology that you pick up. So all under the umbrella of, of the traditional written and oral translation and localization. So you have the on-campus classroom now. We're back, and certainly very vital. And at the same time, people coming in, and you have instructors coming in from a day's job, interpreting and and teaching right there and then, and sharing stories with you, from the day. So that's how it is. And at the same time, you have the transferable, contents, online, and we're sharing our online remote work that we do in the day-to-day. So it is a language-specific model. And it's expandable, to more languages per market need, right? So you have Chinese, Russian, and Spanish as the three main tracks. And that's why, since 2022, right, at the beginning of 2022, we have been approved to add other languages, the top 10 internet languages that are on demand, right, for students' needs. So that's how it is. And, if you look at the typical, so if you're thinking, okay, which of my students or am I, if you're a student and, am I suited for this sort of a field, and career path, right? Basically, if you're in this space, if you even think about, you're even curious about this area, you probably are, okay? So, it would be typically a student who's working towards advanced proficiency in English plus one of our three tracks and other languages, right? You come and you tell us, currently, for example, we have a student who is graduating actually this semester studying in Korean, and she wrote to me as she was applying to the program to say, hey, I'm going to be doing Korean, and I would be working with the faculty, with my colleagues to make sure that, that we're able to provide. you would be, a typical applicant would be someone who would demonstrate interlingual sensibilities, right? And that I encourage students in that statement of purpose to do that, to say, hey, this is what I did over the weekend. I play badminton, for example, right? I hang out with kids, that in addition to English, we also, and then we go eat and we do things, right? So, you could be talking about your background, talking about how you come to be very committed in the study of one language or another. And we have a lot of heritage bilinguals, right? People with involved multilingual identity, as part of their upbringing and their growth. We also have very intentional second language and foreign language learners, right? It depends on what language it is, right? The reality is that, like I said, right, we are still, coming from, let's say, the late 20th century into the 21st, this is still very new, to America. And certain languages are such, we don't have very much of a living linguistic communities, right? In certain languages, unfortunately. And we need to build from there somewhere. And certainly, say in Russian, for example, comparing the three tracks, certainly we have more intentional foreign language learners who may or may not have a cultural or ethnic identification with being Russian. But that doesn't stop people from doing this, right? And in Chinese nowadays, Chinese becoming such a world language, we also have students who are intentional language learners of Chinese. So basically, you want to demonstrate a dynamic definition of language A and B, and that's what we encourage. We do not encourage essentialism, of my parents will, therefore I'm without a doubt, right? The native, so to speak, right? So in other words, right, we do actually make it an intentional view of opposing and kind of pushing back on essentialism around native speakerism, because that is kind of anti-learning, and anti-translation. So labeling and normalizing of the Anglophone is what the culture of practice at MATI would discourage, right? Is the whole idea of interlingualism, is about disrupting that. So we emphasize translation as change and movement, as a transformative, continued transformative experience. That's very empowering, if you take it up as a career. And assessment, right, through measurable criteria as opposed to inherited criteria. Okay, so here's the curriculum. Give me a minute to take in. So these are the courses, and you see it's organized. And I kind of lay this out, horizontally to show you that actually there is no, we don't follow any strict chronology across the curriculum, although we have certain courses that are paired as, prerequisite, say, you've got to have taken either consecutive or interpreting or medical interpreting before you take simultaneous interpreting. It's that kind of thing, that we would require. And we require that you would have taken one written translation course before you take, say, editing and revising for translators, right? So that, you have something to chew on as you do this. But overall, right, let me explain. So here are the three core required courses that we take. And this one is in yellow because we added this after the program was launched. And then here, three core professional translation practice courses. In other words, right, they teach students to think kind of beyond translation studies, right, into, more specifically into looking at professional industry sectors, and industry sector clients, and how do we deal with those different sectors, client sectors. So those are the three. And then you're required to take minimum of 2. You could also take all 3, right? So you see between these 2, you would have picked up, the program requires 10 courses in total, right? So you would have picked up either 5 or 6, okay? That leaves you with electives that you would take either 4 or 5. And as is, the program allows for a student to join that are outside of the Chinese, Russian, and the Spanish track, because there are enough courses, right, under translation technology with the internship and independent studies project for you actually to complete the degree if you're in another language, such as Italian, Japanese, you name it, right? Students, we already have a couple of inquiries. We keep getting them, so I hope one will come through this year. Next year, and that is for Arabic, right? Arabic is coming up to be a very big language in this area. Yeah, as an internet language, really, although of course Russian also predominates on the internet. So you see also that courses are replicable. Okay, you can here is highlighted here, literary translation under Russian. Okay, so we started that in I think fall of 22, and I'm kind of lining this up as a course, depending on students, and the state of enrollment, to start a course in modern literary translation for Chinese, right? So you could do that. Here's critical market perspective in translation that I started way back at NYU, and it's been kind of first as a Chinese specific class, and when I introduced this for our the Chinese program here at Hunter, Professor Chow, she said, oh, we need a Chinese class, so just put it on the Chinese track. So now it's still on the Chinese track, but then I've actually taught this class as a generic all language class. So I'm thinking to actually make this available across the language tracks, because it's really very a good class to take if you want to learn about how to navigate the market. And this class too is actually very English oriented, right? It's about the English as a target language and deliverables in English. So this class can also be made into a language neutral or all language class. So you see here, right, you have language specific courses that you can start on demand, because the Hunter structure, I don't know if it's a CUNY structure, the Hunter structure allows for the independent studies project to be, coded, right? For one student even to do a new imagining of a class, based on any of these classes. So, there's no limit to what we can do here, and that can be done easily. It doesn't take like a year or anything like that. So, we've been doing that, say, for Korean, for one of our students. So that's how we serve, other languages. Okay, and here are, just to present the array of, our team, right? The faculty in charge and the faculty working with me on this program. That is within Marti, because again, there's no limit to others that can actually also come in and in support from other language tracks. Okay, jobs, very quickly. I know that's a big thing, right? So typically, you think in terms of jobs that are tied to the language service providers, because these are huge, and these are some of the typical positions that you could end up in if you are hired in-house. Of course, if you're a translator or interpreter, you could also be working for them as a freelancer. But here are job opportunities that you can think in terms of these titles. And then, of course, for the more fuzzy world out there, when you want to be your own boss, and more nowadays, right? We are really thinking we need to. You have even not to mention people in their 20s and 30s, right? I have 3 nephews, and not one of them is tied to just one job. Okay, usually you have 2. You have your main job and you have your side job. So if you're going to be your own boss, what is called going freelance, right? These are, of course, the top roles that that you would take on in the industry. Okay, you could also be a business owner, right? That was how I started, actually. I started as a team of 4, and we all kind of got into business, and we went to the courthouse and we registered, a small business. It was $10 back then in the 90s. You can do that, right? You can be a personal coach. You have some other, skills, or, like a voice coach, or, diet coach, whatever it is, people do these things, right? And then you build a niche, that may be specific to your language skills, at the same time, then I think as translator interpret, because then you're learning the needs, right? Can be an MC, a talk host, copy editor, right? All of these, or you could be taking multiple roles, right? Within this cloud, it's a script or ghostwriter, right? And literally, you work in the cloud. Filmmaker, cultural consultant, those are titles that I've come across for real, by the way, over the years, a linguist or an expert. Now, the one that I didn't put in here that, I found that, in my work with translators, interpreters in Toronto, it's apparently very common in Toronto to be a real estate agent, to learn all about the real estate, because apparently people work in language specific communities when they're buying property, for whatever reason, right? And you can think about those reasons, sociologically. But it's actually, a lot of the thriving interpreters and translators actually do very well starting out, getting a real estate license, and then, and they may or may not stick with that, right? Once the language part builds up. But a lot of them have done it this way. So something to think about. So then, of course, for your parents, they say, oh, why don't you get a real job? You should go for the real job, So yes, the Marti degree does position you, for your typical corporate track, like any master's degree, in the field that is out there and applicable. You probably, be a junior executive, right, with a master's degree. And the standard expectations for, people applying to white collar jobs, is that, you have a broad language base, knowledge base, you have a high, you have a command of, a high register communication, you know how to act, you know how to talk at a meeting. That's why you learn all these things, in a good professionally oriented master's program. And we make you do that. You can deal with heavy text multimedia, handling of things. And that's a very important skill, right? That you must develop while you are doing your academic studies. If it's an academic study program that does not put you in this kind of multilingual space, then you're not prepared nowadays, really, for to enter, even the corporate area, because this is the bottom line. So and then you have analytical and organizational skills, that you build, as you become a graduate student. Yes, those are the standard expectations of most graduate programs. And this is what it is, right? That MARTI has that other programs doesn't have, which is credential and specialized linguistic skills. Okay, so that you can take, you take up team lead positions in these areas. Okay, and like I said, it's limitless. And these are just looking at the corporate sectors, right? You would be within the corporate headquarters, running the show, because those corporate companies are involved with specific niche markets around the world. Okay, so and of course, right, for if you're working for the state, right, you're working for within the U.S. context, and in cyber and border security for some languages, in research and advocacy, certainly, those, your degree, is going to be looked at as something that stands out, and global educational, initiatives as well. Okay, language verification. This is really for students. The goal of our process, we have a language verification process where once you apply, we review all your documents, and then we will contact you, and we'll set up a time for you to meet on Zoom, to have an interview, right? And it's kind of a test interview to see if you can handle yourself in the two languages that that are in your official pairing. So faculty advisor will review the student's application, personal statement, and then the self-declaration regarding language A and B. And then there will be an interview, and faculty will reach out to proceed via Zoom or phone. It should be 20 minutes or 30 minutes at most. And it may end with a request for a short writing sample. Usually what I do nowadays, I actually use the chat box in the Zoom, for students to respond immediately, interlingually. So, for example, I post a question in Mandarin, and students respond in English using the chat. So that way it is, it is clear that they're not consulting anything else. So, and then, we will by email provide determination, email the student, that usually I do the email myself, although, the faculty in charge could also do it. Either you pass, or, there's some modification involved, or we make certain recommendations. Okay, so it's a fairly simple process. Nothing that takes a lot of preparation or anything. And we have, although on CUNY there's this standard thing that was put in years ago about ACTFL test scores and things, right? We specifically rejected that. I did, because it's an equity issue. It costs a lot of money, and moreover, we actually do lose students who are good, who are well positioned for this field. And the effect of that's very, very much skewed towards people who are academically inclined, and who do well with test scores. Now, this is not to say that if you have good test scores, you by all means, you can include that in your application. But the LPV process is our final determination for admissions to this program. Okay, I think this is really it. Danella, you have anything to fill in that I might have missed, or maybe from a student's perspective, you want to?
From a student perspective, that since we come from so many different backgrounds, I myself come from a musical background as my bachelor's, and so despite where you come from, you can put all your knowledge, all your experience into something language centered, interpreting, translating, and so it's just a really special program, and everyone is just so willing to help each other learn along the way and to learn from one another. And the faculty is amazing as well. They're so hands-on, and they really want you to succeed. So it's really a great program. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Giving it a hard sell. Thanks. Yeah. I'm hopeful that we will continue to grow, and I believe we will. Yeah. And then
for sure.
Hopefully with more other languages coming in, it's more interesting. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. As we evolve. Okay. So I guess we will end it here. And thank you very much. See you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you, Professor Che.
Bye bye.
Thank you.